much for this warm welcome. And it is homecoming for me in so many ways. In fact, it wasn't my youth. It was actually the first 10 years of my life that was rooted in this congregation. And I have stories about that I'll share another time. But remembering the Sundays my mom would have me listen to Dr. John Wolfe was some of my precious memories. On a steaming hot summer day 5 years ago, I was on the other side of the world in Japan, sweeping a gravel-covered path with a bamboo broom midway up a mountain in the Mie Prefecture, a place that is 2.5 hours by bullet train away from Tokyo. I have been in Japan for almost 3 weeks, and much of my time was devoted to studying Shinto, the ancient indigenous spiritual religion of Japan, at the Subaki Grand Shrine. Now, the Subaki Grand Shrine is a sacred site in Shintoism and has welcomed worshipers for over 2,000 years. And during my time there, I donned the white robes of a novice Shinto priest and joined over 20 priests and shrine maidens in their daily rituals and practices. Now, one ritual in particular took place every morning. In fact, a lot of Americans are often warned about this ritual so that you should attend and you should be a part of it. This ritual took place every morning as long as it was not raining. The novice priest would climb the hill to the main shrine to take up a broom and to start sweeping the gravel that led to the shrine's sacred sites. We swept away the leaves and the natural debris that had fallen from the trees the night before onto the gray gravel walkways. The novice priest swept next to the chief priest, the head priest, making small mounds of leaves and sticks to be carried away. Our morning ritual of sweeping was a daunting task. For you see, the Subaki Shrine does not sit in an open field with a forest in the distance. It sits in the heart of a forest, of towering red cedars and hundreds of trees, and in places the trees grow right in the middle of the path you're trying to sweep. And as you sweep the paths clean each morning, even on a summer day, leaves slowly float down around you. For the Shinto, the sweeping paths with the bamboo broom is not just sweeping. It is an important ritual of the shrine. Clearing away leaves from sacred paths is an act of purification of the shrine grounds, and a reminder that to each of us, we are a part of nature, and human beings are intimately connected to nature and the many expressions of the divine. Shinto priests teach that we are born shining, gleaming, and pure. We Unitarian Universalists might call this the spark of the divine or the holy. But the Shinto also teach that as we live our lives, we too gather debris and leaves of our actions, the actions of others, and negative places and spaces, what we might call oppressive structures and systems of injustice. And these elements obscure our harmonious connection with the natural world, with one another, and with ourselves. To return to this harmonious state, the Shinto teach we need renewal. We need renewal and a way to come back in harmony with nature and our own brightness. It was an appealing ideal to me as I swept each morning. It was something I yearned for, coming back into harmony with myself and my life, and perhaps one of the reasons why I wanted to take that trip and to learn about Shinto, even though I'm allergic to shellfish. Japan and the allergy to shellfish is a challenge. After the morning ritual of sweeping, the sound of the tiger drum called the priest and the worshipers to gather in the main shrine for Chohai, the morning ritual, a service where two of the Subaki priests lead the worship of the divine beings called kami. And as a community, we participated in a ritual purification ceremony, chanting an ancient Japanese prayer. Now, when I went to Subaki to spend time at the shrine, I thought I would spend my mornings sweeping, my afternoons learning about Shintoism and Japanese calligraphy and soaking up the stunning surroundings of the shrine. But the ancient purification rituals awakened the desire to pull away the layers of my life, the hurts and the pains and betrayals, the gifts, the joy, the wonder, and to re-examine my purpose and commitments again. After all, 2 decades had passed since I had said yes to a calling to ministry, the vocation I had devoted my entire life since I was 25 years old. I had other periods of vocational discernment when I went back to school for my PhD, leaving behind my beloved congregation. And here I was again, a time to enter into serious discernment about my vocation. Even if I were to keep steady in my work, I needed renewal in my life in other ways. I was hungry for something more. What is your vocation? Yes, you, those online or those sitting here on this sunny day here in Tulsa. Are you in a place where you are wondering what you should do with your life in the next few years, let alone maybe just this week? The Latin word of vocation is voice. The Latin root of the word vocation is voice. To listen to the calling of a voice. Now, some believe that that calling comes from an external source like the goddess or God or the divine. Others interpret vocation as a goal to work towards, often associated with helping professions such as ministers, doctors, lawyers, therapists, nonprofit workers. Another school of thought thinks about vocation as a set of noble ideals and values that, in this case, you also work towards. Some of the great social justice leaders of our time are the role models of this perspective. This is a popular approach to vocation for our goal-setting kind of mindset in this society. I want to be like this person. Here are the moves to get there, and I set that goal and work towards it. We think of what we want to be and we go for it without any real analysis of who we are, our strengths, or our growing edges. Others think of vocation as an inclination towards an occupation, art, or service. It's a natural talent or skill that is particularly held by you in a way that allows you to express yourself in remarkable ways as a sculptor, a painter, a photographer, a weaver, or even an illustrator. In other words, your vocation does not necessarily have to be your job, and I think actually that's one of the ways that we can put ourselves under in a situation of struggle when we make it have to be everything, that it can also be something that you do on the side, that you don't earn a living from, but it is a part of your life and brings wholeness and rootedness to all that you do. It can be artwork, it can be justice work, it can be activism. Now, Parker Palmer, the Quaker teacher, activist, and writer, wrestles with the questions of vocation in many of the books he wrote over the years. And it's Palmer's definition of vocation I return to each fall when I lead a class on vocational studies for the next generation of ministers at Meadville Lombard Theological School, where I'm a professor in addition to my work as your programs minister here at All Souls. Now, Parker Palmer invites us to think of vocation not as a goal, He doesn't want us to do that. He warns us against that. He says that we should seek and listen for our vocation, not as a call from outside ourselves, but as a way to listen to your life. Listening to your life. Who you are, what you are meant to do. As Reverend Davis reminded us, to be authentically ourselves this morning, to listen to your skills and strengths, your values aligning with your action in the world. But that is much more difficult than it would seem. Palmer, in his own investigation of vocation, something he struggled with his entire life, once had a conversation with an older Quaker woman in a congregation he was a part of, and she gave him this advice. Before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen for what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. Now, for those of us who have marginalized identities, the listening process can be extremely challenging as we reconcile what we hear from people and institutions in our society in words and in action that lessen our self-worth and attack our very being. This attempt to tell us who we are versus what we know and who we know we are about ourselves that is good and true and beautiful. In this case, vocational work can be a reconciling of our divided selves between what the world says about us and what we know to be true and authentic. And for all of us, listening to our lives deeply can be frightening and painful as we lean over the edges to look down at all the possibilities. As we name our growing edges, we sink into discomfort as we wrestle with the past, or the discomfort when we try to learn new things, when we experiment with ways to express ourselves. But that is scary. Most of the struggle with vocational discernment has been about that ear or our senses always turning back to the others. Parker Palmer has also observed that in the years of all the retreats that he has led, people have come up to him from time to time to share the notes that they take during retreats. Often these are spiritual discernment, vocational retreats. They show him the notes, and guess what the notes say? He says the pattern is nearly universal. People take copious notes on what the retreat leader says, sometimes on the words of certain wise people in the group, but rarely, if ever, do they take notes on what the people themselves say. We listen for guidance from everywhere, but from within. This is one of the reasons I encourage my students and people I'm ministering to journal or embrace Julia Cameron's morning pages from her classic book, The Artist's Way. Regular journaling gives us space to listen to ourselves, and if you can't write it, you can draw it, and if you can't draw it, you can dictate it, but some kind of feedback so you have a way to listen to yourself. My stay at the Subaki Grand Shrine and the rituals of the Shinto reminded me of the necessity to revisit my vocation from time to time. I had made my life very busy in the years leading up to that trip, and that morning ritual of sweeping invited me to consider how the leaves fall each night, are swept away each morning, and then must be swept again the next day, and again the next day, and again the next day. It was a powerful reminder that renewal and change is possible for us, but it is not one and done. It takes regular, ongoing, intentional work. But vocational reflection would have to wait until I returned home. I knew that I could not do it in Japan, for I was away from the daily demands of my life, my family, my teaching. The only way to reflect on my vocation was to intentionally do so with my community of friends and mentors and colleagues. You need a community to do vocational work, to process and to learn from the listening that you do to your life. And so this morning, I want to leave a story with you, again from my dear mentor in life, Parker Palmer. A story he tells in several of his books when he talks about vocation that reminds us of the perils of vocational work and how it's all too easy to stop when we become frightened. When he was in his early 40s, he took an outward bound course, and in the middle of that course, he was asked to confront a thing he had feared the most since he had heard about the program. He was told that he would put a gossamer thread hooked to a harness around his body, and he would back up over the edge of a 110-foot cliff. He was told to lean out over God's own emptiness and walk down the cliff to the ground 11 stories below. Now, that cliff started with a 5-foot drop to a small ledge, and then a 10-foot drop to another ledge, and then a third and final drop all the way down. Here's Parker Palmer, talking about that experience. He writes, "I tried to negotiate the first drop. My feet instantly went out from under me, and I fell heavily to the first ledge. I don't think you quite have it yet," the instructor said, very astutely from the ground. "You're leaning too close to the rock face. You need to lean much farther back so your feet can grip the wall." That advice, like the advice of some spiritual traditions, went against every instinct. Surely one should hunt the wall, not lean out over the void. But on the second drop, he writes, "I tried to lean back better, but not far enough, and I hit the second ledge with a thud, not unlike the first." "You still don't have it," said the ever-observant instructor. "Try again." Since my next try would be my last one, her counsel was not especially comforting, but try I did, and much to my amazement, I found myself moving slowly down the rock wall. Move by move, step by step, I made my way with growing confidence until about halfway down, I suddenly realized that I was headed to a very large hole in the rock face. And not knowing anything better to do, I froze. The instructor waited a small eternity for me to thaw out, and when she realized I was showing no signs of life, she yelled up, "Is anything wrong, Parker?" As if she needed to ask. To this day, I do not know the source of the voice that came from within me, but my response is a matter of public record, and I said, "I don't want to talk about it." On a rock cliff, 110-foot cliff, hanging there in the air, "I don't want to talk about it." Now the instructor yelled back, "Then it's time you learn the motto of Outward Bound." Wonderful, I thought. I'm about to die, and she's feeding me bromides. But then she spoke words I have never forgotten, words that are so true that it empowered me to negotiate the rest of that cliff without incident. She said, "Parker, if you can't get out of it, get into it." Bone deep, I knew there was no way out of the situation except to go deeper in. And with that knowledge, my body began to move. Parker's story illustrates the challenge of vocational work. It can be scary, it can be unfamiliar, and what comes up can sometimes be hard to face, and we freeze up. But all souls, if you can't get out of it, why don't we get into it? Why do we get into it here? Our spiritual hunger, our need of community, our desire to seek something more in life. And so this year, I invite you. This year at All Souls, take this opportunity to intentionally listen to yourself. Take a class on Wednesday evenings. Show up for a new social event. Be a part of one of our justice teams or one of their justice team actions. Or attend Sunday services on a more regular basis. However you want to do it, let's get into it. Because we can't get out of it, but we can get into it together. Blessed be. Amen.
When I breathe, I breathe in peace. When I breathe, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, when I breathe in, I breathe